Number 8. From the right of magistracy flows the magisterial relation, which is necessary to have a bottom before we can build the relative duties thereon. This brings us under the 5th commandment, which is the rule of all relative duties between inferiors and superiors, requiring honor to be given to fathers, masters, husbands, etc., and to rightful magistrates, who are under such political relations as to infer the same duties, and prohibiting not only the omission of these duties, but also the committing of contrary sins, which may be done not only by contrary acts as dishonoring and rebelling against fathers, magistrates, etc., but also by performing them to contrary objects, as by giving the fathers due to the fathers opposite, and the magistrates due to tyrants, who are their opposites. Certainly this command, prescribing honor, does regulate to whom it should be given, and must be understood in a consistency with that duty and character of one that hath a mind to be to be an inhabitant of the Lord's, quote, holy hill, unquote, Psalm 15, verse 4, quote, in whose eyes a vile person is condemned, but he honoreth them that fear the Lord, unquote. So that we sin against the 5th commandment, when we honor them that we are obliged to condemn by another command. Hence I argue, if owning or honoring of tyrants be a breach of the 5th command, then we cannot own their authority, but the former is true, therefore the latter. I prove the assumption. A honoring the vile, to whom no honor is due, and who stand under no relation as fathers or as fathers, is a breach of the 5th commandment. But the owning of tyrants' authority is an honoring the vile, to whom no honor is due, and who stand under no relation of fathers, and is yet an honoring them as fathers. Therefore the owning of tyrants' authority is a breach of the 5th command. The major is clear, for if the honoring of these to whom no honor is due were not a breach of the 5th command, that precept could neither be kept at all or broken at all. It could not be kept at all, for either it must oblige us to honor all indefinitely as fathers and other relations which cannot be, or else it must leave us still in suspense and ignorance, who shall be the object of our honor, and then it can never be kept. Or finally, it must restrict our honoring to such definite relations to whom it is due, that our transgression of that restriction shall be a breach of it. Next, if it were not so, it could not be broken at all. For if prostituting and abusing honor be not a sin, we cannot sin in the matter of honor at all. For if the abuse of honor be not a sin, then dishonor also is not a sin. For that is but an abuse of the duty, which is a sin, as well as the omission of it. And what should make the taking away of honor from the proper object to be sin, and the giving it to a wrong object to be no sin? Moreover, if this command do not restrict honor to the proper object, we shall never know who is the object. How shall we know who is our Father, or what we owe to him, if we may give another his due? The minor also is manifest. For if tyrants be vile, then no honor is due to them, according to that. Psalm 15, verse 4. And yet it is a honoring them as fathers if they be owned as magistrates. For magistrates are in a political sense fathers. But certain it is that tyrants are vile, as the epithets and characters they get in Scripture prove. But because, in contradiction to this, it may be said, though fathers be never so wicked, yet they are to be honored, because they are still fathers. And though masters be never so vile and froward, yet they are to be subjected unto, 1 Peter 2, verses 18 and 20, and so of other relations to whom honor is due by this command. Therefore, though tyrants be never so vile, they are to be owned under these relations, because they are the higher powers in place of eminency, to whom the Apostle Paul commands to yield subjection, Romans 13, and Peter to give submission and honor, 1 Peter 2, verse 13 and 17. Therefore it must be considered that as the relative duty of honoring the relations to whom it is due must not interfere with the moral duty of condemning the vile, who are not under these relations, so this general moral of condemning the vile must not cassate the obligation of relative duties, but must be understood with a consistency therewith, without any prejudice to the duty itself. We must condemn all the vile that are not under a relation to be honored, and these also that are now in that relation, insofar as they are vile. But now tyrants do not come under these relations at all, that are to be honored by this command. As for the higher powers that Paul speaks of, Romans 13, they are not those which are higher in force, but higher in power, not in authority, but in power, not in a sellicitude of prevalency, but in a pre-excellency of dignity, not in the pomp and pride of their posterity and possession of the place, but by the virtue and value of their office, being ordained of God, not to be resisted, the ministers of God for good, terrors to evildoers, to whom honor is due. Those are not tyrants, but magistrates. Hence it is the word of the same root which is rendered authority, or an authorized power. 1 Timothy 2, verse 2. And from the same word also comes that supreme to whom Peter commands subjection and honor, 1 Peter 2, verse 13. Now these he speaks of have the legal constitution of the people, being the ordinance of man, to be subjected to for the Lord's sake, and who sends other inferior magistrates for the punishment of evildoers and for the praise of them that do well, who are to be honored as kings or lawful magistrates. This cannot be said of tyrants, but more particularly to evince that tyrants and usurpers are not to be honored according to this command, and that it is a breach of it to do so. Let us go through all these relations of superiority that came under the obligation of this command, and we shall find tyrants and usurpers excluded out of all. First, they cannot come under the parental relation. We are indeed to esteem fathers as to esteem kings as fathers, though not properly, but by way of some analogy, because it is their office to care for the people and to be their counselors and to defend them as fathers do for children. But roaring lions and raging bears, as wicked rulers are, Proverbs 28, verse 15, cannot be fathers. But kings cannot properly be owned under this relation, far less tyrants, with whom the analogy of fathers cannot consist, there being so many notable disparities betwixt kings and fathers. Firstly, a father may be a father to one child, but a king cannot be a king or politic father to one only. But his correlate must be a community. A tyrant can be a father to none at all in a politic sense. Secondly, a father is a father by generation to all coming out of his loins. A king not so. He doth not beget them, nor doth their relation flow from that. A tyrant is a destroyer, not a procreator of people. Thirdly, a father is the cause of the natural being of his children, a king only of the politic well-being of his subjects, but tyrants are the cause of the ill-being of both. Fourthly, a father, once a father, as long as his children live, retains still the relation, though he turn mad and never so wicked. A king turning mad may be served as Nebuchadnezzar was. At least all will grant in some cases the subjects may shake off the king, and if in any case it is when he turns tyrant. Fifthly, a father's relation never ceases, whithersoever his children go, but subjects may change their relation to a king by coming under another king in another kingdom. A tyrant will force all lovers of freedom to leave the kingdom where he domineers. Sixthly, a father's relation never changes. He can neither change his children, nor they change their father. But a king may naturalize new subjects, and subjects may also change their sovereign. Royalists will grant a state or commonwealth may make a king, and there is great reason sometimes that a monarchy be turned into a commonwealth. But a tyrant changes those that are under him, expels the natives, brings in foreigners, and all good patriots do pant for a change of him every day. Seventhly, a father hath no power of life and death over his children. A king hath it over his subjects according to law. A tyrant usurps it over the innocent against the law. Eighthly, a father is not a father by consent of his children. A king is by consent of his subjects. A tyrant is neither a father with it nor without it. Ninthly, a father is not made by the children, as a king is by his subjects, as was showed. A tyrant is neither a natural nor by compact, but a self-created power. Tenthly, a father is not chosen conditionally upon compact, as a king is by the free suffrages of the community. A tyrant in this differs from a king, that he is not chosen, and in tyranny from a father. 11thly, children wanting a father cannot choose whom they will to be their father, as subjects wanting a king may choose whom they will and what form they please. But though they can, yet if they be rational, they will never choose a tyrant, nor a tyrannical form of government. 12thly, children cannot restrict their father's power to what degrees they please, as subjects may limit their kings at their first erection. But a tyrant, though he ought, yet he will not be limited, and if he might, he should be restrained. 13thly, children cannot set bounds how long they will have their fathers to continue. Subjects may condescend upon the time in making laws how long such an one shall be their sovereign during life, or while faultless, according as the fundamental law is made at first. Tyrants ought every day to be repressed, that they should not continue at all. Yet giving and not granting that a king were to be owned under the relation of a father, though every man be bound to own and maintain his father's parental authority, yet let the case be put that the father turns a robber, murderer, and avowed enemy of God and the country in his person and authority, in that case to be owned to the dishonor of God and hurt and hazard of the country? Or ought he not rather to be delivered up even by the Son of Justice? Much more then will it follow that a king who turns the more dangerous, because the more powerful robber and legal murderer and enemy to God and the country cannot be owned, seeing the relation between father and son is stronger and stricter, as having another original, than can be betwixt king and subjects, and stands unremoved as long as he is father. Though turning such, they ought to contribute in moral duty, to which their relative duty must cede, that he should no more be a father, nor no more a living man, than when dead by law. Secondly, they cannot come under the herile or masterly relation, though analogically also sometimes they are styled so, and subjects are called servants by reason of their subjection, and because it is the office of kings to command and subjects to obey, in this there is some analogy. But kings cannot properly be owned under this relation as masters over either persons or goods of subjects, far less tyrants, yea, kings assuming a masterly power turn tyrants. Now that the magistratical relation is not that of a master, is clear from many disparities and absurdities, whether we consider the state of hired servants or slaves. For hired servants, the difference is vast betwixt them and subjects. Firstly, the hired servant gets reward for his service by compact. The subjects none, but rather gives the royal reward of tribute to the king for his service. The tyrant exacts it to maintain his tyranny. Secondly, the hired servant is maintained by his master. The subjects maintain the king. The tyrant robs it from them by force. Thirdly, the hired servant bargains only for a time, and then may leave him. The subject cannot give up his covenanted allegiance at that rate, and for these reasons, as the servant may his service, a tyrant will make nor keep no such bargain. Fourthly, the hired servant must have his master's profit mainly before his eyes, and his own secondarily. But the magistrate's power is primarily ordinated to the public good of the community, and only consequently to the good of himself. Fifthly, the master hath a greater power over the hired servant to make and give out laws to him, which if they be lawful he must obey, than the king hath over his nation, to which he is the sole lawgiver, as is showed. Sixthly, the hired servant's subjection is mercenary and servile, but the subject's subjection is civil, free, voluntary, liberal, and loving to a lawful king. Again, for slaves, the difference betwixt them and subjects is great. Number one, slavery, being against nature, rational people would never choose that life if they could help it, but they gladly choose government and governors. Second, slavery would make their condition worse than when they had no government, for liberty is always preferable. Neither could people have acted rationally in setting up government if, to be free of oppression of others, they have given themselves up to slavery under a master who may do what he pleases with them. Third, all slaves are either taken in war or bought with money, or born in the house where their parents were slaves, as Abraham and Solomon had of that sort. But subjects are neither captives nor bought nor born slaves. Fourth, slavery is not natural, but a penal fruit of sin, and would never have been if sin had not been. But government is not so, but natural and necessary. Fifth, slaves are not their master's brethren. Subjects are their king's brethren, quote, over whom he must not lift up himself, unquote, Deuteronomy 17, verse 20. Sixth, masters might purchase and sell their slaves. Abimelech took sheep and menservants and gave them unto Abraham, Genesis 20, verse 14. Jacob had maidservants and menservants and asses, Genesis 30, verse 43. No otherwise than other goods. Solomon got to himself servants and maidens, and servants born in his house, Ecclesiastes 2, verse 7. A king cannot do so with his subjects. Seventh, princes have not this power to make the people slaves, neither from God nor from the people. From God they have none but to feed and to lead them, 2 Samuel 5, verse 2, to rule them so as to feed them, 1 Chronicles 11, verse 2, Psalm 78, verse 71 and 72. From the people they have no power to make slaves. They can give none such. Number 8. Slavery is a curse. It was Canaan's curse to be a servant of servants, Genesis 9, verse 25. But to have magistrates is a promised blessing, Jeremiah 17, verse 25. Ninth, to be free of slavery is a blessing, as the redemption of Egypt's bondage is everywhere called, and the year of redemption was a jubilee of joy. So the freedom of release every 7 years a great privilege, Jeremiah 34, verse 9. But to be free of government is a judgment, Isaiah 3, verses 4 and 5. 'Tis threatened, quote, Israel shall abide without a king, and without a prince, unquote. Hosea 3, verse 4.